Welcome back to the Almost Awakened podcast. Today, we're diving into something that feels like it's touching every corner of our lives right now: the rising sense of division. Maybe you've noticed in your social media feed, in your relationships, in your community, or even in your own body, that feeling of tension, defensiveness, or overwhelm when people think, act, or believe differently than you. In today's episode, we're exploring why we've become so divided, and not just politically or culturally, but neurologically. We'll talk about the unresolved trauma, survival based nervous system patterns, and cognitive biases, and the way that they shape how we see each other, and how that leads to tribalism, black and white thinking, and the tendency to assume the worst in people when we don't understand them. We'll also take a hard look at the media climate, how it changed in the last 30 years, how algorithms are feeding our brains a steady diet of outrage and certainty, and what that's doing to our capacity for nuance, connection, and truth. And finally, we'll offer something we all need more of right now: a path forward. Because while the brain might be wired for protection, we're also wired for connection and healing. And with awareness, regulation, and return to curiosity, we can begin to soften, to reconnect, and to see each other with clearer eyes and open hearts. So take a breath and let's begin.
Healing begins in the body, but awakening touches everything: relationships, purpose, identity, pleasure, and truth. Join Bill Reel and Teresa Hobbs as they explore the real work of becoming a healthier you. Welcome to Almost Awakened.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Almost Awakened podcast. I am one of your hosts, Bill Reel.
And I'm Teresa Hobbs.
And we're excited to be with you. Today, Teresa, what are we talking about? It sounds like it has to do with how you and I disagree and we're different than each other, and we just can't figure out how to make that right.
You mean you and I, or you and I, me and you in the world?
The topic is divisiveness. Let's get into it, you and me.
Yeah, okay.
No, we get along quite well, but that is the topic today that we're going to talk about generally.
Yes, and this is one that I've been super, super excited to talk about because it's everywhere. I mean, I don't think there's a person alive in the modern world who hasn't noticed this intense division. And I think, at least for me, this is how I've been feeling. Like, I feel this sort of like exhaustion from it, from all of this like constant polarization. I think it makes us feel so much more disconnected and more on edge. And so I want to talk today, present some different ideas about, what drives this in our biology, which I think is really interesting because I think the more we know about what is driving us on that level, the more we can bring our awareness and attention to it. And I sort of feel like we have this ancient wiring in our nervous systems and in our brain that drives our behaviors unconsciously. And we have sort of blended that into this really fast-paced modern world where we're kind of at a mismatch, right? Our biology, or our hardware, so to speak, is not up to speed with the level of or the pace of technology. And so I feel like we sort of need a software upgrade. And so today we're going to talk about all the things that sort of drive our biology and give you some tools to upgrade your software, so to speak.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add here on the front is to what you said at the very beginning of that commentary is we live in a world right now, especially just the last few months. If you live in this country, there's so much divisiveness in politics that both sides feel like the other side is evil and the bad guy. There seems to be a deep polarization of ideas at the moment. It felt like when, if I go back a couple of decades and the elections, I'll just use one example of Al Gore versus the younger George Bush. And it didn't really matter to me who won. It really didn't. Like I had my guy I was rooting for, but if the other guy won, it wasn't going to be a disaster. And today everyone feels like, oh no, or, oh, thank goodness, this guy's going to save the world, and the other team would have just blown everything up. And both sides feel that way, and it's so far apart. and everything that's going on in the world with this trade war, and um, I just want to note that all of us are feeling a lot of anxiety. We're feeling a lot of tension, and it feels like there's a lot at stake. And I think it's adding to the feeling of being divided against, whether it's internally in ourselves or divided more specifically against other people outside of us. And I think today's lesson will, I say lesson, but today's conversation will be really helpful to all of us who are feeling a lot at this moment. We're having a lot of thoughts in our head, intrusive thoughts. We're having a lot of anxiety. I think this conversation will be beneficial to everyone because we're all going through a moment collectively in our country's history.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you were talking about that, it made me think about how, from my perspective, it feels dangerous. It feels dangerous to even share an opinion.
Mm,
Because if your opinion doesn't land with the approved group, and also, like, sometimes, I do like to sit in nuance, but even sharing an opinion that's, like, somewhere in the middle
mm,
feels dangerous. It feels like you're gonna be misunderstood because people are trying so hard to put you in one category or another, and then you're somehow being labeled this or labeled that, and it feels awful. So then it feels like you don't really have the, there's no space to actually express a nuanced opinion. And the invitation for people as you're listening to this conversation and some of the information that we're going to present is how do we get back to allowing ourselves to sit in that middle ground, to be in that gray space, to to be really thoughtful in the conversations we have, and to check ourselves before we just put somebody in this category or that category. There's so much area where we don't have to necessarily be categorized or labeled. So that's what I hope that we accomplish in this. But I do think that it's a difficult challenge because as we're all the things we're going to talk about the way our brains work and why we're wired this way, and also how the media sort of takes advantage of that and has sort of also pushed us in these directions.
yeah.
So,
So if everybody can just take a deep breath,
mm, mhm.
and let's have a lot of fun learning today.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I geek out on this stuff because I think it's super fun.
Yeah.
So, first thing I want to just talk about a little bit is this idea, and I learned about this in my trauma recovery course. And there are a couple of different cognitive biases that we have that sort of lock in this black and white thinking that many of us are prone to. So to be clear, so that nobody feels shamed about this is so human. This is within all of us, and these aren't flaws in our reasoning. These are features of how the human brain evolved to survive. So this worked way back in the day, but again, I feel like we have a system that sort of isn't well made for the environment we're in today. So sometimes these cognitive biases can sort of backfire on us. So the first one is called the negativity bias. And this is what our brains are basically wired to pay more attention to threats than to neutral or positive stimulus. And from an evolutionary perspective, it was safer to assume that rustling in the bushes was a predator than to ignore it, right? Like we want to make sure that we're going to survive. But this sort of bites us in the ass today because now we fixate on perceived danger, whether that's in politics, in social media, or in conversations, and we downplay evidence of goodness, nuance, or positive intent. So your brain's going to see one negative comment and forget the 10 positive ones. And also, like, I know this, like, even connects to some of the stuff that you've been reading, Bill, around relationships, right? The idea that you have to have, like, when you're in a fight, I think you're supposed to be like the amount of positive
8 to
interactions you
1.
have is like 5 to 1 or something.
Oh, I thought it was 8 to 1.
8 to 1, okay, something like that.
Yeah.
And then when you're not fighting, I think it's like 20 to 1 or something. It's even more, like, you need
Mhm.
more positive inputs in your relationship to keep it healthy. You need like 20 positive to every 1 negative
Mhm.
because of this negativity bias. It's so profound in our brains. And so just to be aware that we have this can be very helpful to understand, because it's there to serve us, but also it can sort of, we can get hung up on it.
Yeah, if we go all the way back to, again, the universe is 13.8 billion years old. They say planet Earth is like 4.8 billion years old. Um, if you go back that far and you go, what is the first life forms? Okay, they're something really small. Let's just use amoebas as the example. And if amoebas move towards a threat, they die. If amoebas move towards nourishment and safety, they live. And then evolution plays out over millions and billions of years. And over the course of that time, every transition of evolution along the way from the amoeba all the way to Homo sapiens, if we moved towards uh, safety and nourishment, we lived and survived. If we moved towards a threat, it was danger. And so, all along the way, if we thought we saw something in the trees and we were wrong, we lived. It was better to err on the side of thinking you saw something when you didn't, rather than ignore something that was there and be wrong and you died. And that little decision that we've all been programmed with all the way back to the beginning of life has happened uh, in cycles billions and billions and billions of times. So now we come to this moment, 2025, and it's no wonder our brains are designed to see the threat over anything that is peaceful or safety. It is, which is why I've often said that neutral is bad, meaning that if we're already on edge, even something moderate or neutral or um, apathetic, it comes off as a negative
Mm.
rather than just seeing it for what it is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into why that is true as well. So, the next cognitive bias is something called an ambiguity aversion. So, this is discomfort with not knowing or being uncertain. So, we don't like uncertainty. The brain craves clarity, and it will stick with something that seems true or clear, even if it's wrong. So, certainty is always going to feel more safe, and ambiguity or uncertainty means vulnerability. So we'd rather feel confident and wrong than uncertain and accurate. This is, you see people who we call, I don't know, stubborn or whatever. Um, but it's very true. So what how this impacts us today is, we're more likely to jump to conclusions. We are more likely to choose a side. We're more likely to rush to resolve discomfort by adopting a simple narrative, which again, this is uh, this helps to make our decisions quick. Like we can make quick decisions by doing this. However, it also sort of doesn't serve us. So this is where it comes into that place of like, oh, I don't really understand their stance, so they must be part of this group or that group. We want to categorize people. We want to know who they are. We want to put them in certain categories, or we want to look at information and make a quick decision on what it is, even if we're not, even if it's not true, right? We'll jump to label something really quickly.
Yeah, and for the folks who are in the religious deconstruction space, cognitive dissonance comes to mind when I think of ambiguity aversion. So ambiguity is this idea that, hey, we got to be somewhat comfortable in this middle space where we're not exactly sure which way to go. And cognitive dissonance is the same thing. You've got some important belief that your brain wants to hold, and then you have some contradictory evidence to that belief somewhere else. And it causes this tension that is, in a sense, ambiguity aversion. And your brain is telling you, even if you're wrong, make a choice. It is so uncomfortable to stay in no man's land that, as you point out, your brain tells you to even make the wrong decision is better than to sit still. And what we're hoping today is that we can help you understand that in the world we live in today, sitting still for a minute isn't bad. There are moments where real threats are in front of you and you do need to make a quick decision, but those are rare in today's world. Often you can just sit still for a minute, take a deep breath, get back into that ventral state, and make what is the best decision for yourself, even if it takes a few days or weeks or a month to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. All right. The third cognitive bias is something called the commitment and consistency bias, or otherwise known as the inconsistency avoidance aspect. So, This is when we publicly commit to a belief or identity, we're going to feel psychological pressure to stay consistent with it. So this happens because changing our mind can feel like weakness, can feel like betrayal or social instability, and our brains will try to protect our sense of self. So this shows up today in ways where we'll dig into things, even in the face of new information. And I mean, I think that this is really true for people in that are still stuck in religious institutions, where you'll present new information, but then you'll just double down and hold on to that rigid idea or belief because it feels safer to stay wrong than to admit that you've evolved or that there's new information. And again, some beliefs for people will they cling to a belief because it does feel safe. It gives them, again, that certainty. And so being challenged with new information is difficult. But this one I think is also tied to our identity. It's our ego will say, I've already invested in this belief. Now I need to defend it.
And
So
again, in the
yeah.
religious deconstruction space, I would call this belief persistence,
Mm.
where even as you point out, even when you're presented with contradictory information, your brain tells you to find some way, some loophole, some justification to go ahead and maintain the belief because that belief is central to your identity. It's important to you. Your brain picks up on the idea that to let go of that belief would mean some sort of drastic change. And so finding wiggle room, even if the belief doesn't add up, to still justify it and hold on to it, your brain will go to that length to do that.
Yeah, and I think there's a fear here too. If you admit you're wrong about one issue, then what else could you be wrong about? It's almost like, then everything's just going to start falling. It's the whole building's going to crumble and fall apart.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think this comes into play in the next one as well.
Yeah, this is the next bias is the identity constancy. So this is where we build a stable identity over time, whether it's political or spiritual or relational, and we start interpreting the world through that lens. So I am, a liberal, or I am conservative, or I am a Mormon, or I am whatever it is. And we have this because identity helps to organize our experience, and it tells us who we are and where we belong. And but this impacts us in the here and now by how we become resistant to information that doesn't align with our tribe and new perspectives about the tribe that we belong to can feel incredibly threatening to who we think we are. So the brain will filter this information through the lens of, does this match who I am? And you know this one is so powerful, and it's also really interesting that for people in this space who have deconstructed and left the Mormon religion, it's really common for people to disavow the political aspect that was aligned with that religious culture, right? So Mormons tend to be very conservative, and so a lot of people will then go very hard left, and then now they have this new identity as sort of like a liberal or whatever, and so they can get into the same sort of struggle in having to defend or sort of align with the entire perspective of liberalism or whatever it is that they've sort of become. Even being an atheist can bring about the same thing.
Yeah, and there are a couple of examples here. One that just came to mind as I was preparing for this conversation, and I'll continually use politics because it's such an easy place to see it. But in politics, as you point out, there's an expectation that people will be consistent, that taking in new information, having that information inform you, and you making a methodical, educated decision to change your mind about things is seen as weakness in the political world. And so we look at politicians and we look to them to be consistent over the course of their lives. I don't remember what it was in regards to Mitt Romney, but he had one of those moments. But the one I do remember is when, again, George Bush the younger was running up against John Kerry. And there was this famous line that hurt. It was probably the thing that hurt John Kerry the most, was this soundbite where he admitted that it was, quote, "I voted for it before I voted against it," unquote. And he was slaughtered for that because whether it's a politician or it's our expectation of the people who lead us, we expect people to maintain the same positions over the course of their life. But that doesn't make any sense In reality, if I want wisdom in my leaders, I want people who are humble, who are smart. They're smart, but they're also wise enough to know when they're wrong. And when new information comes in, it's one thing to hold a position, but that position should always be subject to change when new information comes in. And I would want my leader, if they are overwhelmed with information that tells them that their past position was wrong, I would want them to change, admit they changed, explain why they changed, and to see that as a strength. But in our current system, again, because of all these mechanisms we're talking about today, we don't look uh, fondly upon people who change their mind, even when we recognize that changing our mind when better information comes in is the much more wise way to live.
Yeah. Yeah, there is no space for that in our political climate, and I think it's sad. It makes sense though. I mean, we wanna know who people are. We wanna categorize them. "Oh, this is who you are. You're consistent. You're telling the truth. You thought this way or believe this way." And there are so many politicians who've changed parties. I mean, like, there should be room to evolve and, like you said, be able to make the best decision based on the information that you have, and if new information comes, then you're gonna maybe make a different choice or a different decision. And also, I would love to just see a politician, and in fact, the people that I find most trustworthy personally are people who are maybe of one political party who will vote on the other political party's side, because that gets my attention. That makes me think, okay, so this person is aligned with this political system, and there's something about this issue that's making them change how they would normally vote. What is that? So I'm going to be more curious about that. I'm going to ask more questions about that, and I'm going to have more of a sense of trust for that person, because it's going to make me feel like they really weighed out that issue and voted their conscience rather than just in alignment with their political party. So that's
Yeah.
how I roll. But I think, again, this whole idea, like, tribalism, and really wanted to feel like we know who people are. We can predict what they're going to do and what they're going to say, and they are going to uphold our identity with this political party in such a way makes us feel safe.
Yeah, I don't want leaders who cave into the noise, but I do want leaders who adapt and change based on the best information available. But there's such a need in all of us to have certainty, the comfort of that. And again, some of these mechanisms we're talking about, which have us willing to be even wrong just to have the answer rather than to sit in ambiguity or in nuance, uh, propels us to all want our leaders to also give us that certainty, give us that safety of knowing the answers and standing for the thing you've always stood for, because that's what we stand for, and we want you
Mm.
to be on our side. And there's so much at play here that pits us against each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next bias is called the social categorization and in-group bias. So this is where we will instinctively group people into us versus them. This helped, ancient humans navigate, friend foe dynamics quickly, but now it creates these rigid lines between communities. And we give the benefit of the doubt to people who seem like us, and we assume bad intent from people who don't seem like us. And this is just an innate human trait, and this is one of the reasons why they say that it's so important to actually travel, because when you travel and you view other people and other cultures, this sort of gets softened. This social categorization and in-group bias gets a little bit softened, because we start to see that everybody is actually just human. Um, yeah, and yeah, this is a hard one too, but it's a really important one to understand, because some of us kind of deny that we have this, but it's there no matter what. I'll notice it in myself if I see somebody who's different or really outside my culture in a very dramatic way. I'm going to pay attention, and my system, like, I'm going to feel viscerally in my body this sort of sense of alertness. Now I have, a mind that can sort of override that, and I can calm my body down and stay open to different people. But it's there. It's inborn, and it's there. And so being aware of it and being able to kind of regulate it and invite ourselves to stay more open to people is really helpful and important.
The other place I'll see this, there are times where we're in a group and the group is doing something and we join in a thing in a way that we wouldn't do normally, but because the group is doing it, we want to fit in. And I know they did some research. It was like a candid camera kind of thing, but it was a scientific study where they put people into like a doctor's waiting room, and they're waiting to see a doctor, and the rest of the people in the room are in on it. They're actors. They're not part of the study. They're there to manipulate the person who is there for the study. And so they will all like stand at the same time, or they'll do some action that you're like, that's weird. And yet it happens over and over again to the point where the other person in the waiting room who's innocent and doesn't know what's going on starts doing what the rest of the group is doing. And you're like, I couldn't be manipulated that easy, but some people can, and maybe you can if you're in the right situation. Another place I've seen this, and I was talking to you over breakfast this morning about this. I used to be a huge wrestling fan, fake wrestling, professional wrestling. And I was a big wrestling fan as a kid. It was my favorite toys. I had the big giant rubber wrestlers, a big plastic wrestling ring, and I would set up all the matches and have everybody fight. And certain people had the belts, and the opponents trying to win the championship belt from them. And then I had another stage at young adulthood, late teenager, young adulthood, where I got back into wrestling again. I'm a little embarrassed to say that, but I really enjoyed it. And one of the things I learned, he's the actor, Dwayne Johnson, who was known as The Rock. When he first came into WWE wrestling, his character was Rocky Maivia, and the fans didn't like him. They didn't like him. And they were trying to put him over as what's called a baby face or a good guy, but the fans would just boo him. And what they ended up doing is they had to figure out a way around it. They had to get the fans to like him. So they ended up blaring sound into the arena while he's coming out to the match that would sound like there were people in the crowd cheering for him. Rocky, Rocky. And it doesn't take long before everyone in the crowd wants to be in on this group thing of cheering for the guy that they perceive that a group of people are cheering for. It's like the wave in baseball. You start to see people do the wave and you're like, oh, I want to be part of this. And you do the wave. And so they would pump sound into the arena. And next thing you know, 40,000 people who were just booing him moments earlier are all chanting his name, Rocky, Rocky. And it's how the World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, used to be WWF, would manipulate its fans into helping push various characters as good guys or bad guys by putting sound into the arena and manipulating them.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because, like you tell that story and it makes you feel like, oh, but I bet that felt so good to be to be in that place. And, you're essentially being manipulated, but you're being manipulated to have this elevated emotion. And then you get a sense of sort of like this big feeling of belonging, and that drive to belong is so powerful. And we sometimes will belong at the cost of, we'll belong to a group at the cost of our own integrity, at the cost of really being aligned to our own truth. And so there is a cost to that. Like, there's safety in it on some level, and then it costs us in different ways as well.
There's this idea of a witch hunt, right? That a person on their own won't do this travesty of a thing. But it's easier to get a group of people to do something horrific. And so when you watch a riot, for instance, any one of those people on their own likely would not have done what they did. But you get a group of people together who are all watching each other escalate, and you're like, oh, they escalate, so I'm escalating. And next thing you know, people are burning things down and tipping cars over.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty scary. Yeah. So, these biases don't operate in isolation, they compound. So you see something you don't understand, which is ambiguity aversion. You feel a threat, negativity bias. You defend your view, consistency bias. You filter it through your identity, constancy, and label them as one of those people, social categorization. And just like that, nuance is gone.
Yeah, one of those people. You're them and I'm us. We're us and they're them. And hence, we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. We're right, they're wrong. And that's how it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's fascinating. It's interesting because even, no matter how good you think you are at critical thinking, or like, this is still driving you.
Mhm.
So I want to kind of put that out there to all the people who think that they can't get hijacked by this, because we all do. Everybody does. And
There's a oh, go ahead, please.
no, I was just gonna say, so just like to diminish the shame of it, we're all human. So just, yeah, just
A book I highly recommend. It's a boring book. It's as dry as can be, but it is a fantastic book for understanding all the ways in which your brain works that you don't even grasp that are going on. And it's the author is Robert Sapolsky, and the book is Behave.
mm,
And in that book, he just goes through 1,000 things where your brain is being manipulated by evolution and its environment to tell you to do things a certain way, and you would never have guessed you're being manipulated in that fashion. And so from that reason alone, it's just a great book to know that you really are a product of what's behind you, rather than this really smart, wise person who's making active decisions in your life at this moment.
yeah, that's cool. All right. Well, so I want to talk about another idea of the brain, and this is called predictive coding. So I don't know how many people have heard of this, but I learned about it through some of the training I did with pain reprocessing therapy, because it was relevant for people who have chronic pain conditions where your brain gets stuck in a loop of creating a pain sensation even when there's no damage to your body. And there's an aspect of predictive coding that's in that. So, predictive coding is the brain's attempt to be efficient. It doesn't wait to gather all the evidence before it decides what's happening. It predicts reality based on past experience. So, it's essentially running a mental shortcut. And it's fascinating because, like, the reality that we experience it's not reality. It's what our brain predicts reality is going to be. There's like a split seconds, like, I don't know, and how short it is, a really small amount of the experience that we have before, like, it's actually the brain predicting rather than what's actually happening, which I think is just absolutely wild. So the brain will, ask what's the most likely thing happening right now based on what I've seen before. And we don't see things as we are, we see them as we are. So past experiences, especially like emotionally charged or traumatic ones, will create templates in the brain. And then the templates become those predictions. And your brain will predict things about people. It's going to predict things about relationships, tone of voice, facial expressions, your emotions, and even, like I said, physical symptoms. And when your brain receives new input, it matches that input against the templates. And it does this in a really quick manner. And if the input is unclear or ambiguous, the brain is going to try to fill in the blanks. So it goes, prediction, perception, confirmation bias, reinforcement of the template. And it's super efficient, and it helps us to move through life quickly. But it also means that you're often reacting to your past more than you are to your present, um, which is, I don't know, it's so interesting. Um, where there's a problem with this is if you sort of combine this predictive coding with past hurt, you're going to get a lot of assumptions about somebody's intent. If your brain learned that people criticize, betray, or abandon you, you're going to expect that even from neutral or kind people. If your political or social experience taught you that those people are dangerous, your brain is going to look for signs to confirm that, and it's going to miss evidence to the contrary. So you may see a comment online and maybe it's a little ambiguous, and your brain's going to immediately fill in the blanks of, oh my gosh, they're attacking me, or they don't care, or they're dangerous, or they're wrong. But maybe they were rushed, or, maybe they had a hard time communicating something, and that's not really a threat at all. But our brain's going to fill that in for us, and it's going to project based on this sort of predictive coding aspect. And this leads to a lot of black and white thinking. Um, Again, because ambiguity or uncertainty is stressful to a dysregulated nervous system, predictive coding steps in to provide certainty, even if it's wrong. And this happens a lot, and I think it's really dangerous because what people will do is they will label a person's intent, or they'll fill in the blanks about a person's intent, and then they will put a label on that person for certain behaviors rather than just talking about that person's behavior. You could say, "Hey, this is what I noticed," or "This is the behavior that came at me," or that came out of an interaction with someone, and I don't really know what that means. So you could sit and ask for clarification. But what happens with a lot of people, especially if you've had trauma or relational issues, is that you're going to fill in their intent for them. And then based on whatever you think their intent was, now you've just given them a label of I don't know, asshole or whatever it is,
Mhm.
or something even more serious like racist or misogynist, or things in that realm. And it's really hard because if you have had a history of feeling unseen or not feeling heard, and you are in an interaction with someone who, you know, was maybe misattuned to you, or whatever, then you may fill in the blanks in a really negative way, and that becomes really, really problematic.
Yeah, an innocent way to think about this predictive technology that we're using is to use an example that has nothing to do with perceiving someone's motivations. And again, as you pointed out in the beginning, our brain predicts, I think it's like 300 milliseconds before that
Mm.
event actually occurs. Our brain is filling in that very next moment of reality. So, in other words, as you look around the room, yes, you're seeing those things, but your brain is predicting that those things are going to be there in the moment that you're processing them. So they were there a few milliseconds ago, and your brain assumes everything stayed still. So when there's these moments in time where you're walking outside and your brain tells you that the curb is either there or not there, or it's at a different height than it is,
Yeah.
and you go to take a step, and then suddenly, like, you stumble, you almost fall down, and you're like, "Oh, wait a minute," like, my and you realize, like, your brain told you the curb ended, or it began, or it was this high, or it was this low, and you just didn't get it right. It's that technology that's working here, but rather than just being this, uh, non-emotional object of a curb, now you're dealing with people's motivations and the behaviors they carry out and the things that happen to you. And so now there are things that feel emotionally at stake. It's not just a matter of going like, "Oh, the curb was taller than my brain told me it was, and I bumped into it and stumbled." It's now that you're seeing people act in your life, and your brain's trying to fill in what everything means, and sometimes it gets it wrong, and yet you're so emotionally pulled to side with what your brain's telling you that you don't have the wherewithal in the emotional moment to settle down and to see things for what they actually are rather than what you're being pulled to see them as.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it could be someone who, let's say there's a man who had some trauma with his mother or something. And the belief system in his brain is that, women are manipulative, right? So then every time he comes in contact with a woman, his brain will drive him to perceive her through that lens of, oh, manipulation. And so then you're going to look for the manipulation and you're going to expect it and you're going to see it. Same with a man. If men are dangerous or men are narcissistic or men are self-serving or whatever it is, then your brain is going to keep looking for moments. And even if there are ambiguous moments, right, where it's not clear cut, you're going to fill in the blanks and say, yep, that's what it was, when maybe that's not really what it was at all.
Yeah, I was in a this might be a good place for this. I was in a social interaction on social media with somebody, and I thought I was being criticized. The person used the phrase "popping off." And, in my generation, same as you, in my generation, popping off was like a negative term. Like, "Look at that kid, he's popping off."
Yeah.
He's spouting off. He's mouthing off. Um, but in today's, uh, way of interpreting things, it's an innocent term, I guess. I guess it means that someone is just sharing their point of view. And, so I got very defensive in that moment. I saw motivation behind words that matched what a past moment meant when I was younger, but isn't the way that the current, society uses that phrase, the younger generation uses that phrase. and I took a misunderstanding where one was not intended, and so it's that kind of thing. Our brain tells us to take a certain kind of meaning from a moment. It's predicting based on past experience what this moment here means, and we're so dead set that we're right that this moment means something, when in reality it could mean something entirely different.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, when you got the new information, how was it for you to sort of update that in your system? What'd you
It
go through?
doesn't it doesn't it's not easy. I still need to reach out to this person and apologize. I'm still
Mm,
trying to get right with it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, uh, when you are informed that you misunderstood and you created some tension in a moment because you misunderstood,
yeah,
it is a hard thing to go, "Okay, I'm the one who messed up.
yeah.
I've gotta be the one who creates this repair and bridges this gap," and, um it is a hard thing to get on board with.
It
Yeah.
is, but that's another reason why I wanna have this conversation, 'cause I wanna normalize that for people. We
Mm.
all do it, everybody does it, and what if we could create more space and normalize that more and not make it so wrong, so it does become easier to sort of move towards that misunderstanding or that person and be able to say, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I totally, I overreacted there. That was my system perceiving that you meant it this way, and I apologize," like, uh, yeah, I mean, we should just have the space for that, and I will say that for me, when that's happened to me, because it happens to me all the time too, once I have reached out and made the repair, offered, like, I just feel so much better, like, I feel like a weight's lifted off me, and, um, I'm more aligned with who I wanna be, so, yeah, I
And
hope you
I just wanna note, as we're talking about this particular instance, it makes me go back to earlier in our conversation as I look at, uh, the commitment and consistency bias, the identity constancy bias, the social categorization and in-group bias. They are all coming into play in that situation
they are.
and affecting our slowness
Mm.
to adapt to the new realization that we messed up in some previous moment and to make it right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. I love that. I love that you found that real-time example. Because again, I mean, I'm sure everyone, if you think about it, you can come up with hundreds and hundreds of these, because this is what it means to be human, and it should also, again, like I said, there should also be space to kind of move towards repair, and we're gonna have another episode on that, I think, too, like, that's a really rich topic, is sort of how to have repair, how to have ruptures and repairs and relationships and normalize that process, so, um
I remember reading a book on rupture and repair, and one of the things of advice that was in there was rather than jump to, because when we get bumped into by someone, we react often by telling that person our narrative. Like, you betrayed me, you whatever it is.
mm,
And the thing they suggested to do was just say ouch in some way, whether it's even just saying ouch or on some level letting the other person know, like, that hurt,
yeah,
because that hurt leaves room for, why did that hurt you? It hurt me because and then I didn't mean it that way. Here's what I intended. But when you go, you betrayed me, you've already assigned meaning and narrative to
yes,
it. And if we could all learn to just soften up and go, because it feels humiliating or shameful to express hurt by itself.
mhm,
There's something about that. And in reality, though, the best way to move through rupture to create space for repair is to leave a really safe space for both people to address what happened and to understand each other and to be heard. And
yeah,
that is best done by just notifying the other person that something inflicted pain. Not that they inflicted pain, but that you felt pain because something was inflicted on you. And getting to the bottom of what that was is setting aside your narrative for just a moment so that you can listen to the other person, that you can understand each other, and they can hear, like, "Oh, you got hurt? Oh, you got hurt because you thought I bumped into you intentionally? Oh, no, no, I was actually looking over my shoulder and I saw this thing that was happening that looked like an emergency over there, and I just wasn't looking in front of me at the moment. I bumped into you, and then I went to say, excuse me. And, sometimes what really happened is so different than the story we have about what happened,
Yeah.
that if we would just announce our pain, we could then open up a space to move through that.
100%. And I think that it's very vulnerable to let people know that we've been hurt, especially if as we let someone know we're hurt, they become very defensive and then they attack us even more. So it you sort of need to know that the other person is going to be able to show up with contrition or with understanding and not attack you further. I think you do a really good job of this, by the way, in real life. So that book really did you service, did me service too.
Cool. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Um, so the key to stopping, like it's not the key isn't to stop your brain from predicting because you can't. It's
Yeah.
gonna we have this machine here, but it's to interrupt the loop long enough to question the story. So if you find yourself in this sort of pickle where you think you know what's happened, you're so certain about it, just pause for a minute and you can ask yourself, what is my brain predicting right now? And then you can ask, is this based on the present moment or is this being driven by my past? And one of the tools that I had heard about in my trauma recovery coaching is um, that it's a past thing based on the intensity of it. So if something feels really big in your body and you compare it to what it really is, that's going to kind of give you an indication that this is probably something historical. Um, Another question you can ask is, what else might be going on here? And then, slow down again and ask, what do I actually know? And what am I assuming? There's a phrase about like, assuming makes an ass out of you and me or something.
When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Yes.
Yes, which I think is great. So the simple pause creates space, and then space is where you can connect into curiosity and connection, and clearer thinking can emerge.
It
So,
yeah, I think that, when someone bumps into us, and I'm sorry, that's just always the way I articulate this, but when someone bumps into us, we feel something and we weren't expecting it. By the way, I'll just say this. The hardest moments to handle emotionally are when we get caught off guard. And
mm,
it can be something as little as someone actually bumping into you. It can be something as big as someone doing something that you thought they were going to handle something one way and they handled it another. And you have this, again, narrative about it. But when someone bumps into you and your body starts to react, just notice based on the conversations that we've had before this one, that your nervous system, your brain is trying to drag you out of your frontal cortex, your ventral state, and it's trying to drag you into fight, freeze, flight, all those things. It's trying to get you to a place in your brain where you can protect yourself, but now you're no longer in a place where you're going to handle this situation uh, in your being your best self.
yeah,
Being able to handle emotion and to make methodical decisions and to make the best articulation of something to work through a conflict, and just notice that you can't help that until you start to retrain your brain to do what you're saying. Take a breath,
yep,
give yourself a pause, try as hard as you can. This is something I've really worked hard at, is in moments where I start to feel something, is to just notice that part of me that can be aware of the parts of me that are beginning to react. It just makes a world of difference.
yeah, it really does. It takes practice, but once you start to get the hang of it, and it becomes a little easier.
Mhm.
And yeah, yeah, I think that's great. Are you ready to move on to the media? This is this is a
Oh, boy, oh boy.
yeah. So we're going to talk about, the media climate and how basically the media has taken advantage of all of our sort of biological wiring. Um yeah, and so we have to sort of be very conscious and aware of how we are being manipulated. So, um If anyone, is older than, I don't know, 30, um, they will remember how things used to be, back in the day when we had, I don't know, like 3 main news stations. We had, CBS, ABC, NBC, that's where we got our news. We had, maybe 1 or 2 local newspapers, and then maybe you had, like, a news magazine, like Time or Newsweek, or, some people would get the New York Times, stuff like that. And back then, there were still differences in framing, but there was a shared baseline of reality, and most people had, some common exposure to the same events, the same data and reporting, even if they, were different interpretations of it. So the news cycle was a lot slower, and that allowed time for fact checking, for editorial review, and for reflective analysis. And slower news equals more space for discernment and nuance. So let's fast forward to today, which is quite a different climate. And now your news feed is continuous, it's personalized, it's algorithmically optimized, and it's emotionally triggering. And that's not good. So, and this is the other thing too, is, news back 30 years ago, they would just give you information. They would give you, like, this is what happened. Now we have the editorial review, which is all about, or not editorial review, but we have, what is it called when people are commentators? We have political commentators or commentators on the news, where they're not only telling you what happened, they're telling you why. They're giving you all of this, this interpretation of it. They're talking about people's intentions. Like, it's horrible. So you're not just, you're not getting information, you're getting content that's curated to keep you scrolling. And so they capitalize on outrage, on fear, on drama, and identity validation. So there's a show on Netflix that's called something, but it talks all about this sort of algorithm thing, the social something. Oh, I wish I had that. I should try to find that. I'll try and find the link to it and put it in the bottom section of this podcast. But essentially, how algorithms work is that social media and content platforms, they don't show you what's true or even what's balanced. They show you what's going to keep you engaged. So the algorithm will watch what you click, what you share, what you pause to look at, what provokes a reaction, especially if it's anger, disgust, or surprise. And then it shows you more of that. So that's what you're getting. You're getting this confirmation bias, like, oh gosh, everyone agrees with me. And then you get this out-group stereotyping. Oh, those people are crazy, right? And you see it in, oh God, all the commentary that you get. It's all about us versus them. It's so divisive. And this leads to what I have experienced a lot of, which is this emotional exhaustion, anxiety, and cynicism. And so there was a 2018 MIT study that found that false stories spread 6 times faster than true ones on Twitter, especially those that provoke mental outrage or fear. And you need to know that media platforms are profiting from your reactivity. The more triggered you are, the more you're going to scroll, and the more you scroll, the more data they gather. So that's what's interesting is I used to think, like, oh, they're just making money off of the ads, which yes, they do, but it's not the ads that they're making money off of. They're making money off of your data. So they're literally mining your brain in all these nuanced ways to gather what ads to give you. And then they sell that information so that they can use targeted ads to sell you, more things that you're actually going to buy. So that just means that they're really, really good at keeping you hooked on all this information.
Yeah, and I want to put something up on the screen here and just talk about this for a moment. So,
Mm.
to exactly what you're saying. So, first off, Facebook. If you are more liberal or Democrat minded, you are going to, if you are new to Facebook, say today's the first day you created a Facebook account, you make some friends on Facebook, you start seeing things show up, whatever things you spend more time with it staying put on the screen, or the more the things that you click and read more about, it's going to just feed you more of that stuff. So if 6 months goes by, a year goes by, and you and I, we've been on social media now since we were young adults or late teenagers. So they've had essentially our entire adult life to figure out what it is we want and like. And they'll just give you more of that. I've already noticed in Facebook that if I start to click a short video or two, next thing I know, the next 5 days, that's the only kinds of shorts that I'm getting. So that happens on Facebook. It happens on TikTok. There's this big thing going on right now with TikTok where the US government is imposing that at some point here, China will need to sell TikTok to an American company, the American version of it, because America feels threatened, and rightfully so, that TikTok is being manipulated by China in terms of what stories you get, what ads you get, so that you are presented with a narrative that is shaded in China's favor. And so this is the main reason for why this whole TikTok thing is a big deal at the moment, and why the US government is dictating that China sell it. Up on the screen right now is the media bias chart. Now, this isn't perfect. I'm not saying this is an exact representation, but it's close enough for the conversation that we're having. When you and I started dating 6 months ago, I told you up front that I'm really not interested in politics, and I wasn't. But to Teresa's dismay, the Trump winning the election and some other things happening, I started paying a little more attention. And today I'm probably way too focused, uber focused on politics. But I listen to a lot of it, and I try to listen to all sides. I try to listen to the left, where I hear a lot of stories coming from MSNBC. I listen to a lot of things in the middle, with Forbes and Market Watch, News Nation, SAN, which is I forget what it's called, but it's anyway. And then you got to the right, you got Fox, and then in the far right, you've got Blaze Media, which I think is Glenn Beck's media. You got the Daily Mail, the Daily Wire. Actually, you got Fox News there. Fox Business is in the mild right. And what I've had to just learn is that both extremes specifically are swaying things in a way that if your household just listens to MSNBC, or your household just listens to the Daily Beast or the Atlantic, or your household listens to Blaze Media or Fox News or the National Review or the Federalist, you're getting deeply slanted information. Now, I'm going to acknowledge when I listen to Forbes in the middle, I'm kind of bored. I'm just getting the news, but it's not entertaining. It doesn't have the commentary that the other sides do. And so we all need to be aware of how social media algorithms and how various news outlets are trying to entertain us and trying to sway us, so that we can, at the very least, try to pick up on some of that, so that we still have the ability to sort through things and figure out where the truth is. Now, I'm not here to tell you where the truth is. What I am here to say is that it probably isn't on one extreme side or the other, and that all of us need to be aware of where we're getting our news from and what we want the purpose of our news to be. Maybe we want to be entertained. There are certain news things I do listen to simply to be entertained. But if I want the truth, I need to go digging a little more for it, because the way the system is set up is it's not going to be offered to me in a very in a way that just makes it easy to find it.
Yeah, so I have a question for you around this. So
Please.
I wanna ask you, because I've noticed things, but I'm gonna ask you what you've noticed yourself. Since you have been sort of ingesting more news in this way,
Yeah.
and you've been very your goal is to try to understand. Your goal is to try to be more informed. But I wanna ask you, how do you think that's affected your nervous system?
I'm definitely more on edge. And we're in this moment, there's this trade war thing going on. And I've got a little bit of money that our nonprofit has saved up to. I'm trying to figure out the right moment to invest that, so that I can create a space that you, me, Radio Free Mormon, all the other folks who are creating content, that we can benefit from that years into the future, rather than that small amount of money disappearing in a year or two if donations died away. And I always tell people someday I'll be 75 years old, 85 years old, and maybe no one's going to listen to a 75-year-old and donate money to a nonprofit that puts content out. So you have this window of time, at least in my head, where you have to be smart about how you manage all of that. And so this is one of those moments where I saw the market go way down and I've been sort of watching everything unfold and I'm trying to pay close attention. And I think it's been important for me. I think I've made much better decisions in handling that because I paid close attention.
Mhm.
But as you point out, paying close attention costs something.
Yeah, it does.
My nervous system is more on edge. I am feeling the stress of what's going on in the world, whereas I see other people who go, I don't pay any attention to that. I just live my life here in my little circle and deal with my little things. And they are feeling a lot more peace than I am at the present.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And, just to kind of go into more of what you said, like how this affects, how these algorithms and how this kind of cycle of information, constant information affects your nervous system. The constant stimulation is going to keep you in that sympathetic activation, so fight, flight, or freeze. You're going to get nuance fatigue. This is again, like you said, oh, when I'm watching stuff on Forbes, I'm bored. Well, yeah. Because you've been so stimulated by all these other things that are so like, intense that yeah, you get nuance fatigue and the brain is overwhelmed by conflicting narratives and emotional intensity, so it simplifies everything into good guys and bad guys. And I will even say like you are such a great critical thinker, but even I've seen sometimes when you reflect back stuff that like good guys, bad guys stuff, right? It happens. It sneaks up on you. You can't help it. And it happens to me too. And then I'll
It's
have to be like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Slow this
there's
down.
yeah, there's such a again, I don't care what side you pick. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. But I'll just note in this moment where the Trump administration is currently leading our country, there he's the president and his staff is who the decision makers are at this moment. And on one side, they are draining the swamp, and they are finally somebody standing up to China who has been building up for World War III and is going to attack Taiwan any moment. Uh, and we have no choice but to make these changes in our system in order to protect us, right? And then the other side is saying, no, this guy is trying to take, he is trying to create a rebellion and take over the government and break down our system and have everything fall apart. And people have figured in one way or another, they've sort of naturally fallen into one of those two camps.
Mhm.
And uh and maybe maybe it's one of those, but
Yeah.
maybe it's neither of those. And maybe the
Mhm.
truth is somewhere else. Um but we are all being pushed by the media, the algorithms, the things that are being put in front of our eyes. We're being pushed to polarize one direction or the other. Again, it didn't matter if Bush or Gore won, the country was going to be pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Today, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like everything is at stake, and the left is sure of their narrative, and the right is sure of their narrative, and it forces, and hopefully we can get out of it, but it forces us to see each other as the enemy and to be divided, which is the very thing we're talking about today. And the only way we can get out of that thinking is to slow down, get into your frontal cortex, be be in a healthier space in your head, which is hard to do when you're being presented with all of this stuff, but also to take in information in lots of places and to be curious about what's going on, and to just leave room that maybe everything on the other side isn't what they're telling you, and maybe everything on your side isn't what they're telling you, and maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. And if it weren't exactly where you think it is, how would you discover that? How would you learn that maybe you're wrong about some things? Um, and that has been quite interesting to try and do. I don't know how good I'm doing at it. As you know, I'm failing at it sometimes. Um, but I am curious and I am listening to both sides and I am trying to weigh in my head what is the most rational way to see this in spite of all the static or all the noise.
Yeah. Well, and this is just something to consider. We have been hearing this polarizing rhetoric for over a decade, for a long time. And we somehow survived through Trump's first term. And then for the people that are on the right, we also survived through Biden's term. And now we're back with Trump, and we're probably going to survive on some level. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But what I do to sort of move through it with a little bit more calm is I like sitting in the I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't have to know. And I'm not rather than practicing the certainty of, oh my God, this is what's going to happen. He's going to take us down this road, or he's going to save us. Oh my God. I'm just like, we'll find out. I'm just going to take every day as it is and stay as close to the present moment as I can, and not practice fear, because it's too overwhelming to my nervous system. I have lived through so much heightened activation, and I had to learn the hard way by my body breaking down that was not serving me. And so I've learned a new way to sort of be in life. And on some level, it can kind of keep me a little bit ignorant because I don't digest and ingest as much information from news sources. But if it's relevant to me, then I will. I do find it interesting to have conversations with you about the stuff that you watch, but I don't want to watch it all.
Yeah.
It's just too much. So
And
yeah.
and I think maybe
Mm.
the main gist here is just know, again, right. Don't get so caught up in it, maybe. And also be aware that you are being manipulated for profit by everyone around you.
Yes.
Any company you are allowing to show you information is manipulating you.
Yeah, it is. And the algorithm, it doesn't care if you're right or wrong. It's only whether you're hooked.
Mm.
And instead of expanding your thinking, modern media is going to narrow it. And instead of helping us to see clearly, it's going to magnify our fears and distort our perceptions. So, in a world of algorithmic media, the loudest, most extreme, most polarizing content wins, not the most accurate or empathetic. So, we think we're consuming media to understand the world, which I think that you do too. And I think that you do it in a responsible way. Um, but I think we're consuming media that's manipulating our emotional state, no matter how aware we are. We could do our best, but I still think that to some level we're all gonna find ourselves a bit manipulated. So,
Mm.
which is gonna make us more reactive, more tribal, more distrustful, and less open to complexity, nuance, or shared humanity. So again, a few things to consider. Um, become a conscious consumer of information. You can regulate before engaging with social media, which is probably a little silly. But I'm laughing because I was doing some regulation tools before we started this podcast. So I was doing a few strange breathing techniques and the VU breath, which maybe in another podcast I'll teach y'all what that is. We had a I think you taught this to someone when you were doing part of
Mhm.
your coursework,
Yeah.
and it was a little awkward, and then they made a joke about it, calling it the moo breath. So occasionally Bill and you'll hear one of us, from one end of the house, moo, just because it's sort of an inside joke. So anyway,
Yeah.
so there's lots of different tools to regulate. You can go, walk outside on your lawn, or walk barefoot on the concrete, or do some rhythmic swaying tool, whatever it is. You can find some way to sort of regulate before you engage with media. You can diversify your sources of media, as Bill talked about. You can take regular breaks. This is really, really nice to just take a media break. Sometimes even a few days is helpful. And then ask the questions, is this informing me or is this inflaming me? Yeah, and we may not be able to change the algorithm or rewire the whole culture overnight, but we can change the way we relate to it and to each other. So it's more about moving from reactivity to intentionality, from projection to presence, and from algorithm fed certainty to self generated clarity.
Yeah, the one thing
Um,
I'll add here is, and I've experienced this firsthand. In the last month, I've posted some things on social media where I shared my curiosity. I was watching the news on both sides, and my brain, which I think does a fairly decent job at rational thinking and critical thinking, and I leave room for that's not perfect, and maybe it's horrifically off from what I think it is. But I would observe things, and my curiosity would notice the way my brain is organizing the data. I would see what both sides are saying, and I would share those observations on social media, and I would get annihilated.
yeah,
People would make immediately, they would make extreme assumptions about who I am, what I stand for, how I think politically, where I'm at in politics, who I voted for, and which side I'm on, and why I'm the bad guy.
yeah,
And it's so strange because what they're describing is the opposite of where I'm coming from. And all I would do is I know, like, I don't have a problem getting outside of my echo chamber and opening myself up to maybe the world is different than the group I'm surrounded by thinks it is. And as I was experiencing curiosity, and my brain was telling me that maybe something else is going on than the way my echo chamber believes about this, I simply wanted to present, like, hey, everyone, maybe consider, is it possible that this other thing is happening that's different than you think it is? Um, and I got annihilated for that.
yeah,
And what I would just say to folks is be curious. There is nothing wrong with going, like, here's where I stand politically, but someone just offered a differing perspective and they're willing to talk about it. They're willing to engage you in a way that they express how they came to where they got to that, and you get to say how you got to that, and you leave room that maybe the best way we get to the truth is not by being surrounded by people who are like-minded, but by engaging with people who think differently than you, but not in a way that's just confrontation about who's right and who's wrong, but a conversation in a way to understand how both sides got to that place,
mm,
so that you can make educated decisions about whether there's information that's outside, you have blind spots, whether there's information that's outside of your awareness that would actually change your mind. You don't have to change your mind, but if there's information that would change your mind, wouldn't you want to know that information? And the
yeah.
only way to get there is curiosity.
It's true, and I will say, like, you are still the person everybody knows you to be. You are a a very curious person who's a truth seeker, and you still walk around the house going like, "I don't know. I'm not sure. This looks this way, but I don't know. I'm not sure." So you leave a lot of room and space to potentially, what you're seeing may not be what you're seeing. You're just continually looking and trying to see if you're getting the right read on it. And yeah, I understand how you wanted to have just an open conversation and get some dialogue and feedback, and you weren't allowed. It was like y- you um you shifted the rules. Like, it is interesting again just to see that experience, how much pushback you got. And you're in a group of people who you consider to be curious and open-minded, and I think you maybe expected to be received a little bit differently, and that wasn't especially pleasant for you.
My goal wasn't to advocate for who's the good guy or who's the bad guy. Rather, I'm watching all of these events unfold in the world, and I was wanting to offer people a community that I care about, and also friend groups and text messages that I care about. I wanted to offer all of those people an opportunity to at least be curious, so that if they had a blind spot, they would be better prepared to capitalize on the moment that was in front of them. And um, I'll simply say that I wanted my friends and the people I cared about to benefit as much as they could from the moment,
Mhm.
because markets are going up and down and things like are going on that are crazy. And in that panic, some people are taking their money out of the market And in that panic, some people are putting their money into the market, and one of those will end up being the right answer, and one of those will end up not being the right answer. And all of us being curious about what's going on gives us the best chance to figure out what is right or what isn't.
Yeah.
Curiosity is our best chance at getting the best information and making then the best decisions about what we do. And that was
Yeah.
my only goal, was to open all of us, myself included, up to curiosity so that we could all collectively make the best decisions about how we handle uh, this moment in time where everything is in chaos and going up and down.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this centered around, you know, the current president who is, eh, you can't say his name without people feeling strong feelings one way or the other. And I'll just say that, in 2020, his last year in office, I couldn't hear his name without viscerally reacting. Like I would get so angry and shut down. I couldn't tolerate a conversation about it. It was I didn't have the capacity at the time. It was very painful for me. I loathed him. There aren't there are a few people who have had that much hatred for another person as I had for him. And and then Biden got in, and we went through those 4 years, and I kinda, like, numbed out. I didn't pay attention to. In fact, I had to get off Facebook in 2021, after, after the whole stolen election thing, and I just took some space, and then I kinda just didn't pay attention to anything Biden did in office because I was just so numb to it, and and then over this last year is when I think I've challenged myself to be a little bit more curious about things, and and now I'm at a place where I can hear his name. I still can't say that I like the guy or I think he's a good person, and I think you agree with me, like, neither one of us think that, like, he's a healthy human being, but I have gotten a lot more curious about what his motives are, what drives him as a person, and in that curiosity, I have been able to sort of displace all of that internalized ickiness and hatred, and I just feel I'm in a more neutral, balanced place with it, which feels so much better to me, and I think puts me in a better position to be able to look at what's happening, without, getting lost in bias.
Yeah, the reality is that as you watch things unfold, regardless of who's leading the country, regardless of which side is on top at the moment, regardless of what things are being carried out, it's the ability to go, I like that thing they did. I don't like that thing. I think
Mhm.
that thing was a bad move. I think that thing is a good move.
Yeah,
And because the truth, no matter what you think, I'm just going to tell you the truth is somewhere other than the extremes on the sides.
it is. I agree. I agree. So, this last part that we're going to talk about are just different things that you can do. We covered the whole regulate before you react thing, but I want to speak just a little bit more about this and offer maybe a few tools. So, your brain can't do nuance if your body is in survival mode. And if you go back to the first podcast we did on the nervous system, it talks more about this in depth, in more depth. But, when you feel triggered, when you feel urgency in your body, when you feel flooded by emotion, again, you can just pause. You can take a breath low into your belly. You can do something as simple as orienting to your surroundings, which is a really great hack for your nervous system. Just being able to kind of just slow down and slowly take a panoramic look around the room that you're in actually gives your brain the message that everything is okay. There's no predator that's chasing you. You are here now in this present moment, and it's a quick, easy tool to sort of reset your nervous system. And then I always give my clients uh, what if questions or open ended questions to ask themselves. So because sometimes you can ask yourself, like if you just tell yourself something, your brain's going to react and sort of push back. So if you ask things in question format, like, am I safe right now? Or even you can ask the question of, what if I'm actually safe right now? That sort of gets your brain to come back into this moment and be like, wow, okay, objectively, I am safe right now. Whatever this projected idea of what's going to happen tomorrow is in my brain isn't happening in this moment. So I really don't need to worry about it or get all worked up about it. Can I just come back to here and now and recognize and acknowledge that there's safety in this moment? And there's a practice where you can take a 90-second delay before reacting to something that's emotionally charged or to emotionally charged post or conversation, and just let your system settle before your mind creates meaning. So that's
Hmm,
one
that's great.
one practice. Another one is question the narrative your brain is writing. So your brain is a meaning making machine, but it's not always right. It's efficient. So it's more efficient than it is accurate. So when you notice judgment or you notice blame or an assumption rising up, just ask yourself, what is my brain predicting here? Is this based on what's actually happening or on past patterns? And could there be another explanation? And again, that curiosity is what's going to serve you best here, because a lot of things that we interpret are not what we think they are.
I had a note here that curiosity is an act of rebellion, and I love that. It's an act
Mm,
of rebellion against your own brain's programming. It's an act of rebellion against the systems that seek to control you. It's an act of rebellion against any expectation or trauma in your past or the history that's happened behind you. Curiosity is an act of rebellion, and it really is an important step to stepping outside of all of these mechanisms that evolution has handed you that are on their own manipulating you in various directions.
yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think it's so true. That's one of the biggest pieces of healing from anything. And I stress that so much with my clients, and also it's a really fun place to be in if you can get the hang of it. It's so much fun to be curious. It really is. You new things will come to you that you never had access to without curiosity.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing you can do again is curate your information diet. So you wouldn't eat fast food all day and expect to feel great. So don't feed your brain a steady stream of emotionally manipulative content. So choose media that informs, not inflames. Follow people you disagree with, who speak with integrity. And again, for me, I really like to see people who can hold multiple perspectives, who aren't just aligned with one side. I'm trying to think of um, like during the pandemic, I remember trying to follow advice from people who just seemed open-minded, who could recognize aspects that some people were calling out as problematic in medicine, but also helped explain things that might have seemed scary or dangerous. Yeah, just people who had sort of like a balanced perspective. Um, Let's see, you can pay attention to how you feel while consuming media. So, do you feel energized? Do you feel activated? Do you feel regulated? Yeah, like, and even to be able to understand how you feel, you have to slow down enough and drop into your body and develop more awareness. So, awareness is a huge piece of all of this, and that's kind of where you can start. In addition, you can try a news fast for 24 to 48 hours and see how your nervous system responds. If you notice that you're less keyed up, that might be an indication that you could use some slowing down. Um, this next piece is separating your identity from your ideas. You are more than your opinions, and so is everybody else. So remember that. When we attach our identity to a belief, we defend it like it's our life. That's how debates become battles and disagreement becomes dehumanization. And it doesn't matter what side you're on. I have seen so many times, we'll just bring this up in a subject that touches me. So, patriarchy, for example, right? As a woman, I have been affected by patriarchy, so have many men. And if I get into a place where I start hating men or I hate the system and then I attack men, then I am dehumanizing men. So I have not helped anything. I've degraded our system. And so you have to be really careful about how you perceive other people and how you engage in disagreement. You can practice changing your mind without shame, just like we were talking, and practice being able to sort of admit when you're wrong or admit when you got something wrong because of a bias in your system, and normalize that and anti-shame yourself if you can. Um,
I'll
you give
just note,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just note, almost every time I come to a disagreement with someone, I'm in conflict with someone else. The way they want their world to look, the beliefs that they hold, the perspectives that they have, when those are different and clash into me, almost always it's a difference of values. It's not that they're wrong and I'm right, it's that they come to this situation valuing different things to different degrees than I do. It's a difference of history. They've experienced things differently than I have, hence, they're affected differently. That thing affects them differently than it affects me. Um, Genetics, like, they're a different human being than me. And if you can, as you said here, humanize them, say, like, "Look, that's a person who comes to this moment with everything behind them being entirely different than what brought me to this moment. And can I understand how they got here?" Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry, I think is
Mm,
the other gentleman's name.
yeah, what happened to
Uh,
you?
what happened to you? And the whole idea is we have been tackling trauma by asking people, "Why did you do that?" And that's the wrong question. Instead, the question should be, "What happened to you?"
Yeah.
And, if we stopped long enough to go, instead of going like, "Why did you do that?" Go, "What brought you to this moment that that's what you valued, and that was why you thought this needed to be different than the way I wanted it to be," would create so many more curious moments that would help inform us so that we can understand why someone is and values and thinks and behaves the way they do, rather than judging the action as good or bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Um, so yeah, if we can just invite complexity into our worldview, if we don't collapse someone's full humanity into a single label, we can practice. You can practice saying this before you engage in hard dialogue, which is, my worth isn't tied to being right, and their value isn't erased by being wrong. And that is true. And if you can, yeah, like I think there are parts of my journey where I have had to consciously give myself permission to be wrong, or to mess up or to I remember, it was a few months back and I was about to do an interview with someone, they have a pretty large YouTube following, and they're gonna interview me about my story with chronic illness, and it's, like, the first interview I'd done, and I was so nervous, and I just remember right before the interview started, my brain just went blank, just completely blank. And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna mess this up. This is gonna be so horrible." And then I just took a minute right before and I paused and I just told myself, like, you know what? This can be the worst interview in history. You can mess up so badly and it's still gonna be okay. Like no matter what. And I offered that to myself, this freedom to unconditionally accept myself. And it was amazing because all of the pressure lifted. I actually did great in the interview, and I don't think anybody would have noticed that I was so nervous. But I think if we can give ourselves permission to be wrong and give other people permission to be wrong and to be human, it has a huge impact. It can emancipate you, free you. So,
Yeah, I think give grace.
mm,
We all need it, right? We all make mistakes and we all misunderstand each other. Almost every I've said this before in conversation on this podcast, but almost every disagreement, another fact of disagreement is that one of us said something wrong. We articulated it in a way that was abrasive to the other person, or we understood what the other person said wrong. We interpreted their articulation in a way that they didn't intend.
mhm.
Um, And only curiosity, only ventral state is going to allow us to figure out what happened in that moment so that we get past the offense, which wasn't intended almost assuredly, and we get to some sense of understanding why things unfolded the way they did.
Yeah. And again, one of the ways to get to curiosity is to ask questions. What did they mean? What if what I'm interpreting isn't actually true? What if? If you can just write out a list of what if questions or just questions, it's going to help engage that curiosity. And this last aspect is, reclaiming curiosity as a daily practice. So, it says curiosity is the antidote to reactivity, to judgment and rigidity, and it puts the nervous system into a relational present moment state, which is so true. It is one of the quickest ways to move towards the ventral state. Because if we cultivate curiosity, so curiosity is an aspect of ventral vagal, which is the part of the nervous system we want to be in social engagement, to feel safe, to feel okay in the world. And when you're in ventral, you're going to naturally be more curious. But one of the ways to get into ventral is to stimulate curiosity. So it kind of goes both ways. And so, again, those questions are really important. And dang, I had a thought and now it's gone. But if you can let go of needing to resolve every conflict or label every opinion, if you can stay with a question a little bit longer, if you can practice saying, tell me more. Another thing too, like, we often have this urgency that comes from being overstimulated and being in, the sympathetic or fight flight state. And I used to write I wrote out this sticky note that said, "You have all the time in the world," and I put it in my car because that's where I tended to feel like I had to race around, and it really helped a lot. It would kind of refocus my mind, and every time I felt that urgency, I'd look at that note and be like, "Oh yeah, yeah. I've got all the time. I don't have to get there." And Bill knows this because I tell it to him all the time. He's probably sick of me being this little sticky note that he didn't ask for, but I I don't know, it's what brings you back into ventral. It's these little practices that are gonna help you come to a place where you can stay in nuance, you can stay in, um, complexity. So it's worth your while. There's another suggestion for a practice, which is journal one question a day that you don't have an answer for and see how long you can sit with the discomfort of not knowing.
Mm.
So if that's interesting to anybody, you can try that out. Um, any last thoughts on this aspect of, what have you done in your life to sort of, I mean, you're just a naturally curious person, but why do you think you are that way? I guess I want to ask.
Um, I have been so certain of things in my life only to find out that I was dead wrong about those things, that I realize I can be even as an intelligent human being who tries to be good at critical thinking, I'm well aware that I could at any moment be wrong and certainly am wrong about things by which I'm certain of. So when something even the slightest bit of incongruence has me diving into the information and trying to find more information, I don't want to be wrong, and I'm naturally going to be wrong about things. And my best defense against having really faulty beliefs or perspectives is to be curious. And so I was just telling you at breakfast this morning that I often run into people who express wanting to know something, but wanting it to be handed to them. There are so many times in my life that somebody wants you to give them the information when really what they need to do is go read a book, go
Yeah.
type it into Google, go get curious and go find out and go read more than just one thing. Go get both sides of the story. Um, uh, 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 any political issue, the one that comes to mind is abortion. When I was back as a believing Mormon, I was taught to be pro-life, and that was the only acceptable decision. And I remember one day going, I want to know more about this issue. And so there was, I can't remember what the name of the website is. It still exists today. At least it did as of like a month ago. But what it did was it presented it steel manned both positions. Instead of creating straw men, it said, no, no, here's what a intelligent, articulate, informed human being, how they would present pro-life, and here's how they would present pro-choice. And I read through all of that. And as a believing Latter-day Saint, again, you can disagree with me. I don't care about that. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's just inside my own brain trying to be a critical thinker. My brain told me it doesn't matter what your system told you, the other side makes more sense. And so I switched. And I would just say that in life, we ought to be willing to do that. And so rather than ask for someone to tell you what the right answer is, go look it up and go look at both sides and don't trust any one source. Let your brain sort out the evidence all over the place and try to figure out rationally what's going on and what makes the most sense.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. That was one of the things I really liked about you when we met was how curious you were and the amount or the capacity that you had to sit in nuance and to be in the gray area. I really really like that. I like meeting people in that space. I think it just leads to interesting conversations. I think it leads to more evolution and growth. And I think that as a humanity, if we want to evolve and survive in this world that we're living in, that is more and more looking like we're not, we really are going to have to embrace nuance. We're going to have to come together. We're going to have to learn how to cooperate and coexist. And so I don't know. I get excited about it. I think it's a really fun place to be. And so I just want to invite people and again show you that the way to get there isn't more certainty. It's going to be giving yourself permission to be wrong, taking away the shame of not knowing, building more capacity to sit with uncertainty and not knowing. I think I don't know where I shared this, but I've shared the story before, but I went through a period of time when I was sick. I'll share my story more at some point, but suffice it to say, I had several years where I couldn't get out of bed. And I was in bed and I couldn't handle a lot of stimulation. So the most I could do to sort of distract myself was read. And I had a lot of things to think about during that time. And I went through this period of time where it just kind of dawned on me that there was no knowing. I could not ever know the truth about anything, like fully, truly know. And I was pissed. I was angry. I was pissed. I was frustrated. And I just couldn't make sense of it. And so I just sat with it and sat with it and sat with it. And it took many, many months until I finally got to the place where I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's no knowing. Oh, there's no knowing. And it became more comfortable for me. And I actually find a lot of comfort in that space now. So I think it can be done because it happened for me. And I think that we can be better humans when we can sit in that space. So anyway, those are my sort of last thoughts. Do you have any other things to offer?
I'll just say that I appreciate you as well. We have really great conversations because I think we have no problem disagreeing with each other, but we do so in a way that leaves ourselves open that the other person might be right.
Mhm.
Um, I did an episode early on in the Almost Awakened podcast where we talked about tools to awakening. And you and I talked about this at breakfast this morning that traveling, for instance, and when you travel, you get to see other humans of different colors, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different religions, different um, social economic status.
Mm.
And what you realize, again, you start off as a kid who's raised by parents who, uh, I'll just go back one generation, didn't have the healthiest views about people who were different. And then you go back one more generation and they are deeply racist and homophobic things going on, at least in my family.
Mhm.
And by being exposed to people who are different, you get to a point where you're like, oh, like we're all just humans. If I had been born in that person's family with their history and their genetics and their values and their traumas and their experience, I would have made the same decisions they would have made. Um, Opening yourself up. You said curiosity. I'll say be open.
Mm.
Be open. Learn from everyone. Give everyone a chance to teach you something. And if you disagree adamantly, your brain wants it to be a disagreement about right and wrong. instead get into conflict with someone to understand and be understood.
Mm.
And the conversation will unfold so much differently if you do that. So that's my 2 cents. I really enjoy, uh, how we engage each other even in conflict, which has been
Yeah.
maybe fun is
I was gonna
one
say
of the
fun. I
words I
find it fun.
use. Mhm.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
and it's funny because even when we're in conflict, I think, eventually we'll get to laughter. Like,
Mhm.
sometimes we can really, hold lightness in the midst of conflict, and
Mhm.
that can be really, really quite fun, and it's challenging, and it's nice to be challenged by another person's brain, especially when there's a deep level of trust and safety, which
Mhm.
I think that we've cultivated as well. So yeah, that makes it a lot easier. But this has been a super fun conversation, and I hope people resonate with this. Although we were talking earlier today, and we're like, the best conversations out there, the best topics out there, people don't seem to really resonate with very much. But I hope this one does because I think it touches all of us, and we're all just human. But I hope that we can grow and evolve and move towards more connection rather than protection.
Yeah. I hope folks are enjoying it as well, and, I can't wait to create our next conversation.
Awesome.
Okay, anything else from you?
Nope, that's it.
All right, folks, you can find our audio on our YouTube channel. It's the Mormon Discussion YouTube channel. You can also go to almostawaken.org. We very much do appreciate donations. It's what funds being able to keep these conversations going far into the future. So if you like the Almost Awakened podcast, you can go to almostawaken.org, click the donate button, and send a few bucks. We would very much appreciate that. We'll continue to try to create conversations that are beneficial to those of you who are either in the midst of deconstruction or have stepped away from religion, and give you sort of those tools and information that helps build a healthy, happy second half of life. But we're grateful for all of you that join us. Please leave your comments below. Please share this with a friend, and please hit that like button. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on the Almost Awakened podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Almost Awakened podcast. For more tools, resources, and real talk about conscious living, visit almostawaken.org. That's almostawaken.org, your resource for waking up